What do snakes have to do with beautiful women? Most would say nothing, but if Preston Sturges' classic The Lady Eve is anything to go by, the connection is not only possible, but even strong. If The Lady Eve isn't the very best of all the Golden Age Hollywood screwball comedies, then it's at least the very best written. Sturges' genius for clever dialogue and the double, even triple underlining of ironies is world famous. To this day, he tops lists of all-time great screenwriters, being placed up there consistently with other greats, like Wilder, the Coen brothers, Schrader, Lubitsch, Coppola, and Tarantino. Among his already giant list of great screenplays, The Lady Eve might be his best. But no classic films are made on great writing alone. Both Henry Fonda and Barbara Stanwyck deliver great performances here, but it's Stanwyck especially, who not only plays her character, but also plays the character her character plays, who truly steals the show. It's one of the greatest performances in a comedy film. Stanwyck's Jean here is no less a femme fatale than she was in her other iconic performance as Phyllis Dietrichson in Double Indemnity. Of course, the genre of film lowers the stakes here, making her much more human in the process, but her status as skilled and directed seductress is unquestionable in both films, and this is relevant to some points I'll make later. But beyond that, is there anything more that can be derived from The Lady Eve above just quality writing, acting, and humor? Well, I tend to think so. Like with most screwball comedies, The Lady Eve is primarily a story about the battle of the sexes. Barbara Stanwyck's Jean is a whip-smart con artist with full control of social dynamics, but also with great skill at appealing to men romantically, needling them with opportunity, planting seeds of fantasy within their minds. Her strategy seems to be a concerted effort of both push and pull. In my university psychology classes, I was taught that this is what builds anticipation, and through building anticipation, what eventually leads to genuine desire. Most of the research which lent evidence to this idea was recent, proof that Hollywood screenwriters, directors, actors, and actresses are natural-born psychologists. Of course, they would have to be. The same techniques they use to seduce one another on screen are the same techniques they use to seduce us as their audience. But beyond just Jean, Henry Fonda's character Charles is a socially hapless, analytical male. He's attractive and rich and seems to be an all-around good guy, but the human social world, being slightly more sophisticated and hard to maneuver than the social world of venomous serpents, is beyond him at all times. This haplessness, rather than being an obstacle to love, is an obstacle to his own happiness, as the realization of his own shortcomings at reading others takes as much of a toll on him as the realization that he's been duped by the woman he's fallen in love with. Ironically, Jean's talents for manipulation, which is the yin to his yang, also serves to separate her from her own joy, as it not only plants seeds of distrust in his mind, but the reality of what she's done, the self-awareness that it was indeed wrong, forces her into a dislike of herself, making Charles an enemy to her in the process. A lot of what's being described here is actually pretty standard fare for romantic screwball comedies of the era. So then what makes The Lady Eve a superlative amongst all the others, at least in terms of themes and motifs? I think what this film does uniquely well is it frames the cat and mouse game of love and dating as one of identity, or how we choose to present ourselves to the object of our desire. Jean, being a con artist, is a master of gerrymandering how she's represented to the outside world. Her own will and the will of the character she's playing at any given moment oftentimes overlap, the real expressing itself through the garb of the facade. Sometimes her facade exposes some hidden part of who she truly is, a piece of her she's not even aware of herself. She's like a pagan goddess, wearing masks which represent abstract concepts which hold more genuine value for truth or illumination than the goddess herself. Maybe that's an extreme analogy to make, but apparently not from Charles's perspective, as he falls into extreme worship, both for Jean and for her same but different alter ego Eve. The reason why these false representations work so well is that they involve understanding the desires of the target, then embodying those desires. It's temptation almost in the classical sense, the kind we see represented in folk stories, mythology, and religion. With The Lady Eve, this connection is very obvious. After all, the film contains snakes and a character named Eve, both obvious references to the Garden of Eden story in the book of Genesis. In the case of that story, Adam and Eve live in a complete paradise, one with eternal, unjudging love, as well as the right and all the time in the world to examine and categorize animals, an activity that Charles is obsessed with. The most important part of the Adam and Eve story is that it signifies mankind's fall from a state of ignorance and the bliss which comes from it, down into the cold, hard truth of the world below. So how, beyond just the surface-level references, does this film relate to the theme of lost innocence or lost paradise? Well, most obviously, love is a form of bliss, one brought on by ignorance. Both characters fall for each other blindly here. One is ignorant to the cons being played on him, the other ignorant to how hurtful these cons can be. The dropping of the veil here, where Charles realizes the layers of deception, is the same dropping of the veil in any relationship, where one partner begins to notice flaws in the other, flaws which either weren't so apparent at first, or flaws which were willfully ignored. There is no definitive snake figure in this story then, though the closest person to representing one is Jean herself. Charles makes a joke earlier in the film about not being caught up with any women, about how he'll stick strictly to reptiles, and while visually Stanwyck is anything but reptilian, her slippery, elusive nature and her ability to tempt are what draw Charles into being attracted to her. It's ironic that she fears snakes so viscerally, considering she, at least spiritually, sort of is one. Though we can place this shoe firmly on the other foot as well, Charles, while less slippery, elusive, or sly, does serve as a figure of temptation for Jean. After all, she was secure in her life of lying, cheating, and stealing until she met him. Falling for him was a sort of fall from the childlike innocence of moral relativism and selfishness. He leaves her naked and ashamed in a world of responsibility, empathy, and love. They both do this to one another, which I think gives the film a lot of depth. It isn't just about love and courtship, as most screwball comedies are. It's about the sacrifices which come from real love. Love is not paradise, it's quite the opposite. Sturges understood this, was wise enough to celebrate it, and was talented enough to represent it in a tight, cleverly written script. Like the Adam and Eve story, which works as a beautiful metaphor for what it is to be human in general, the Lady Eve typifies the romantic relationships of mankind from time immemorial into the foreseeable future. Jean, by playing two separate versions of herself, which is to imply that she's capable and likely has, played dozens of other versions beyond that, then necessarily becomes the figure representing every woman. Charles, in his blundering to understand the women he falls head over heels for, represents every man. The specifics of every relationship vary quite considerably, but just like Charles's bodyguard notices, everything is the same. It's only a repetition of what came before under a superficially altered guise. And of course, this has to be true, otherwise we as the audience wouldn't be able to relate to this story. It would be a story about Jean and Charles and would relate to them alone, without us being able to find any similarities between their relationship and the relationships we experience ourselves. The human experience, while varying quite a bit, is always identical, from person to person when it comes to the fundamentals. The Lady Eve, by showing us the same relationship, the same courting process happening twice, is only showing us the similarities between all courtship and all relationships. Yes, accents and hair colors change, histories, circumstance, and even the lexicon does, but the spirit holds firm. These necessary hardships then, rather than inspiring us to renunciate love, should only inspire us to love all that much harder. After all, we already bit the apple. We might as well enjoy the way it tastes.